Hello and welcome to No Drop. Big ride season is almost back. Summer is right around the corner, and with that, a lot of us are feeling inspired to take on bigger and bigger rides. Maybe you're looking to do more distance than you've ever done before, or maybe you're looking to climb more than ever before, or maybe you're looking to do both. And those things take a lot of time in the saddle, time out in nature. It's one of my favorite parts of riding these big rides. But in the transition period from our winter and spring riding, where maybe we're still being good about our consistency, but we're just not pursuing those 100+ mile rides. I did my first big ride last week, and it had me thinking about how do we get ourselves prepared, back in shape, build positive habits in order to pursue these big rides and have them be enjoyable and not just suffer through the whole experience. There are 4 areas I want to focus on in this episode: training and preparing ourselves for big rides. And those areas are food and nutrition, comfort on the bike, dealing with the heat, and also dealing with hydration. This ride I did last week was 132 miles, and hold on, let me find the Strava just so I can talk specific numbers here. So this ride was up in Angeles Forest, so it was through the mountains. It had a decent amount of climbing, and it was 132 miles of riding and 15,200 feet of climbing. It was just a little bit over 9.5 hours in the saddle. And in that experience, I really noticed what parts of my body weren't doing well and how I had forgotten about a lot of very positive habits that typically I have when I'm riding that allow me to create a more positive experience. So I had forgotten about a lot of things. I got through the ride, but I can't say it was the most successful because there were some parts where I was really suffering and really having to push through. Personally, I'm not somebody who is in cycling or connected with cycling because of suffering. I've had very few experiences where I've literally been suffering, even on my biggest rides. So now that I've been through that first experience of the year, I want to focus on what I'm going to be doing to rebuild all those positive connections and how I'm going to set myself up and train to get these adaptations that are so, so valuable when we start riding really, really big rides. The first thing I noticed was my eating and my nutrition was very poor, mostly in how much I was eating. I would forget to eat for 45 minutes to an hour at a time. Sometimes we were moving at paces where I wasn't comfortable with reaching in my pockets. It's my preference to continue riding as I eat. I'm not a big fan of stopping to eat. And I was with people who also like to roll continuously. And in those times, you don't really have the option to stop and eat, digest a little bit. So I was being very forgetful, and what I was eating didn't really feel that great on my stomach. The big reason for that is we need to remember that being able to digest as you exercise is additional physical stress, and if it's something that I haven't been doing, my body isn't used to it. So I need to train my body, and I need to get it used to eating, digesting, being able to process energy. Eating and training is very important, and on big rides, it is critical. That is your energy. So what I'm going to do in order to bring this adaptation back is I'm going to start introducing food into all of my rides. Anything over an hour, I will have food, and my rule will be I've got to finish this food before I finish my ride. So I'm going to be practicing eating, and the best thing for everybody to eat is whatever they like. Calories are always better than no calories. If you want to try to optimize your nutrition for your performance, then you need to start looking at food sources that are very high in glucose. Well, eating brought some discomfort and some just fullness that I didn't really enjoy on the bike. That wasn't the only discomfort that I felt. I was very much made aware of how little I've been riding, how I haven't been putting just purely time in the saddle. There's a resilience that is built up with continuous, consistent time in the saddle. For me, I feel it the most sort of in like my sit bone area. Definitely after I finished my ride, being the first big ride of the year, definitely had some discomfort around the saddle area, but it just wasn't pleasant to be in the saddle for 9 hours. And beyond the saddle area, definitely felt additional discomfort in my lower back, in my shoulders, my hands and wrists due to the handlebars. To address the issue of comfort, I'm going to do two things. One will be just trying to increase time in the saddle and put more time into the bike. The more of these, quote, bigger rides that I do, the more conditioned I will get. And to aid along in that process, I'll also be doing a little bit more core work when I'm off the bike. By building a strong core, that's where so much comfort comes from. Being able to engage those muscles, I definitely could feel my hips sort of bouncing in the saddle. That's not a great thing when it comes to being comfortable long-term on the bike. You really want to be flat, stationary, not have any of that rocking side to side motion or visible elevation of your hip or your pelvis. So I'll be working on re-engaging those muscles so that when I'm in the saddle, I can activate them and increase comfort. That's going to make a huge, huge difference. So adding a little core work will increase comfort dramatically. Transitioning into summer brings longer days, and that is so appealing for big rides. It also brings increased heat. Heat acclimation is really, really critical going into the summer. Last year, maybe 2 years ago, I did a podcast episode devoted completely to acclimating to the heat, and it has some pretty hardcore advice in there. It's not for everybody, but one thing to remember is that as we're getting used to the heat, that is another adaptation, just like eating, just like putting time in the saddle. That is one more area where these adaptations take time. So for the first 2 to 4 weeks being exposed to heat, expect it to not feel great. When I can anticipate the negative feelings or something that's not going to feel great, it always makes it a little bit easier for me to process it and work through it. So the heat will not be enjoyable at first. It's going to take 2 to 4 weeks of consistent exposure to build up that heat resilience. Now, once it's there, you're going to hold on to it until you spend, weeks on end being in temperatures that are not hot. With my heat training, we had a section of the ride last weekend where we hit 105 degrees on the Garmin temperature. It was miserable, and all we could do, because like we said, we do not have the systems adjusted to deal with this heat. So all we could do was slow down, take it easy, try to catch our breath. We were sweating so much, which is good. Sweating is a great way to cool yourself. However, it was so unpleasant being in that heat. So I'm very excited for getting this continued heat exposure. And if that's something that you really want to target in on, how to adapt to heat, listen to that podcast episode. It's called Adapting to Heat. It is episode 8 from May 13th, 2022. Heat training, very important. Be mindful. Expect it to not be super pleasant. And if you need more information, episode 8 of No Drop has an entire episode devoted just to how to adapt to heat. With that increase in heat, with extended times in the saddle, hydration becomes even more crucial. Rebuilding positive habits when it comes to hydration, so taking a sip of water every 10 to 15 minutes, being mindful of how many bottles you're consuming per hour, these are habits that I need to work on and I need to rebuild, because when we were out, I did not drink enough water consistently. We were stopping places and I would notice that my bottle was still mostly full and I should have finished the whole thing. So to drink more consistently is a huge part of the hydration equation, and introducing electrolytes is something that, as the heat cranks up, is going to become more and more crucial, because as we sweat, we don't just lose water, we also lose a lot of salt content. I'll be introducing a product like Scratch or Osmo into my routine in order to make sure that I'm holding on to that salt balance that is so critical. And with my heat training, this is a very important part of just building a system where your body can regulate your temperature better and better be able to handle these swings into hot temperatures. So hydration is the fourth and final place that I'm going to be looking to prioritize my training over this last month. Big rides are my absolute favorite. Going bigger, climbing more has been a huge part of my pursuit in cycling. And this year, I don't have any goals to outdo myself. I'm not trying to go bigger. I'm not trying to go further. But I still do have some pretty big rides and pretty big goals that I do want to accomplish. So I can't wait to build all these adjustments over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'm hoping to have most of this training completed, building these positive habits and getting the adaptations in my body that will make it better, more enjoyable, and less stressful to complete these big rides. There's so much that goes into a big ride, in the planning, in the execution of it. If you want to learn more about those things, the series I did on cycling logistics can be really helpful. We cover route analysis, we cover nutrition. These are two very important parts of planning a big ride and completing it successfully. So there's lots of resources on the No Drop podcast. The route analysis episode was episode 11 from 2023, and the nutrition episode was July 22nd, episode 12. Please check those out. If you have any questions, if you want to know more about how to train or how to connect with big rides, please send me a message on Instagram. I'm always happy to help people figure out how to up their riding and how to take on new challenges. I find that very rewarding. So if you need any help, please reach out. I'm always happy to be a resource. If you've gotten something special out of this podcast, you can support me. Go to the podcast notes, and there you'll find a link to a Venmo and to a PayPal. You can contribute to support future content. You can also go to jeffzenfitness.com, and you'll find those same Venmo and PayPal links there. Until next time, ride safe.